We're joined by former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to President George W. Bush, Fran Townsend. Fran, thank you so much for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
Quickly, before we move on, what do you have to say to Mike Morell's expectations of what's happening?
Well, I'll tell you, right now feels very much like that pre-9/11 period. Remember, you had the East Africa Embassy bombing attack. You had the USS Cole. That drumbeat that you felt that operationally they were kind of on a roll. And remember, John Brennan last week said this is part of an external operations plan and it's not over. And so I do worry about an attack on the homeland. Look, the problem is much larger in Western Europe. They have thousands of foreign fighters who've come back. But Director Comey of the FBI has said to us, 250 foreign fighters here in the United States, 1,000 individuals who are subjects of investigation because of their ties to ISIS. And so, look, these people will be inspired. They're here. The access to weapons in this country is much easier. And so a Paris-style attack on a soft target is a real threat here right now.
We are watching and waiting for that press conference to start at 11:30 this morning. What do you expect the presidents to talk about?
Well, first and foremost, the purpose of the visit is to discuss a coalition in terms of reaction to the Paris attacks. But they can't come out there and not discuss the development overnight of the shoot-down of the Russian plane by the Turkish government. It's a very delicate matter, right? Because, of course, these are NATO countries, France and the United States, Turkey. You really have an issue here about how will they de-escalate the tension now? And there's an opportunity for the president and President Hollande of France to step up and play a real leadership role in terms of de-escalation. The name of the game today for them ought to be, how do you manage this crisis and de-escalate it?
Fran, if you were advising President Obama, and given your experience dealing with Vladimir Putin, what would you tell President Obama to do in response to what's happened today in Turkey with the downing of this Russian fighter jet?
Well, as I say, look, the Russians have come out and they're going to, as you discussed in the last segment, right, they're going to take economic action. And if you can keep it on that level, I mean, I think the Turks have got to expect there's going to be a reaction. I think you're going to have to try and broker, can you get the Turks to a place where they can accept responsibility in a sort of non-inflammatory way for what happened, get the Russians to acknowledge, come part of the way, and broker sort of a détente on this issue, whether it's economic, there's economic sort of a way to repay for the damage, to recover the pilots. What is the condition of the pilots? We've seen photographs suggesting one of the pilots is dead.
Right.
And so there are sort of diplomatic ways in which the president and President Hollande of France can sort of be the go-betweens between the Turks and the Russians, and that's what they ought to be trying to do today.
You know, there's been a lot of back and forth, too, about our strategy with ISIS. Some critics want more boots on the ground. They want boots on the ground to start with. Is that the way to go, or how do you see the strategy?
So, look, the president is engaged in what he referred to as an Iraq-first strategy, and I think pretty clearly that's not going to work, and it certainly isn't enough against the threat. And so first and foremost, you've got to shift to a Syria-first strategy because that's where the global threat emanates from. Second, I would divide and conquer, right? I would take ISIS and I'd work that border between Syria and Iraq, cut them into two separate entities that have to fight you independently because that way they're weaker. I do think you need to step up the air campaign. You need air controllers from the United States to be able to call in strikes. You've got to loosen the rules of engagement. I think we've seen the beginnings of that with the hitting of these oil convoys. And I do think you're going to need more trainers, more advisors on the ground. They don't all have to be American. You know, when we talk about this issue, we tend to say we think of it as if troops on the ground mean American troops. You've got very capable Jordanian and Emirati special forces. I think you need safe havens for the refugees to stem that flow, both in the south and the north of Syria. I think you got to take out the Syrian airfield so you stop the barrel bombing of Syrian civilians. There's a bunch of things that we could do to very much ramp up this strategy and make a difference in Syria.
Fran Townsend, stay with us, please. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.